The Silent Verdict. Chapter 1. The Missing Juror. The courtroom was packed to the brim with anxious faces, waiting for the verdict. The trial had been lengthy and emotionally charged. A high-profile case involving a powerful real estate tycoon accused of fraud and corruption. The defendant, Raymond Kent, sat coolly at the defense table, his eyes fixed on the empty seat where juror number 7 should have been. Judge Albright peered over his glasses, scanning the room. "We will take a short recess while we locate the missing juror," he announced, banging his gavel. The courtroom erupted into whispers, speculation growing like wildfire. As the lawyers and attendees filed out, the tension in the air was palpable. Claire Manning, the prosecutor, stood at the window of her office, overlooking the bustling street below. She couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. Something was wrong. "What do you think happened to him?" her assistant, Mark, asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I don't know," Claire muttered, her mind racing. Juror number 7, Evan Halloway, had been an ordinary man. A schoolteacher, father of 2, no history of erratic behavior. His disappearance made no sense, especially not in the middle of such a high-stakes case. Half an hour passed, and still no sign of Evan. Judge Albright reconvened the courtroom. "It seems juror number 7 has vanished," he announced gravely. "We will proceed without him." As the court awaited the verdict from the remaining jurors, Claire couldn't focus. The image of that empty seat loomed large in her mind. Where could Evan be? Then came the verdict. Not guilty. Raymond Kent smiled, shook his attorney's hand, and left the courthouse a free man. Claire's chest tightened with frustration. The evidence had been overwhelming, and yet it hadn't been enough. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Evan Halloway's disappearance held the key to a mystery far greater than a verdict. If only she could find him before it was too late. The case takes a shocking turn. What do you think happened to juror number 7? Subscribe and share to find out more. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Act. The evening air was thick with tension as Claire Manning stepped out of the courthouse, her mind still reeling from the day's events. The shadows lengthened across the city, and the normally bustling downtown felt eerily quiet. Claire checked her phone again. Nothing. Not a single update from the police on Evan Halloway's whereabouts. She began walking toward her car when Mark jogged up behind her. "Any news on Halloway?" he asked, slightly out of breath. Claire shook her head. "It's like he vanished into thin air. There's no trace of him. No credit card activity, no cell phone signals, nothing." Mark glanced around nervously. "What are the chances someone got to him? I mean, Kent has powerful connections. What if?" Claire cut him off, her voice firm. "We can't jump to conclusions, but..." She trailed off, her thoughts spiraling. It wasn't impossible. Kent's money and influence reached far. Too far. "Something doesn't sit right with me, Mark." He was too clean, too composed when the verdict came down. Almost like he knew this would happen. "Maybe he did," Mark said, lowering his voice. "What if this entire trial was just a performance? What if Halloway was part of something bigger?" Claire stopped in her tracks, her mind racing. Mark's words hit harder than she expected. "I need to talk to the lead investigator. There's got to be something we're missing." They turned the corner just as Claire's phone buzzed. It was Detective Lucas. "Manning, we found something," he said in a low, grave tone. "Meet me at the police station." The ride over felt like an eternity. Claire's fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel, her thoughts jumping from the trial to the missing juror, to Kent's unsettling smile as he walked out of the courtroom a free man. What was it about that moment that kept gnawing at her? When she arrived at the station, Detective Lucas was waiting with a file under his arm. His expression was grim. "We found Halloway's car abandoned near the river. Keys still in the ignition. No sign of a struggle. But this..." He handed her the file. Inside were photographs, a series of images showing Evan Halloway on the night he vanished. He wasn't alone. A shadowy figure was captured meeting him near the courthouse, just after the court session had ended. Claire squinted at the images, her stomach nodding. The figure's face was obscured, but one thing was clear. Evan Halloway's disappearance wasn't a coincidence. As Claire studied the photos, she knew this was only the beginning. Someone didn't want Halloway testifying. Someone with enough power to erase him from existence. But who and why? There was only one way to find out. The mystery deepens. Who do you think was behind the disappearance of juror number 7? Subscribe and share to follow this unraveling conspiracy. Chapter 3. The Cryptic Message. The images in the file left Claire with more questions than answers. Who was that shadowy figure? And why meet Evan after the court session? As Claire sat in Detective Lucas's office, she felt a creeping suspicion that this wasn't just about Kent. There was something far deeper, something darker lurking beneath the surface of the case. "Have you checked the security cameras near the courthouse?" she asked, flipping through the images again. Lucas nodded. "We've gone through every angle, but that figure always stays just out of focus. It's like they knew where the cameras were positioned. But there's something else." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, placing it on the table in front of her. "We found this in Halloway's car. It looks like some kind of note, but it's in a cipher." Claire unfolded the note carefully. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect, but the message was indecipherable. A string of numbers and symbols arranged in a pattern. Her heart quickened. This wasn't just a random disappearance. Someone had planned this down to the smallest detail. "We're running it through code-breaking software, but it could take time," Lucas said, watching her closely. "Does it ring any bells?" Claire bit her lip. She had seen something like this before. A similar code had surfaced in a case a few years ago, one involving another high-profile figure. But that case had been swept under the rug when the key witness had vanished. "Get me everything you can on that cipher," Claire said, her mind already working. "I have a feeling this goes back years." As she left the station, her phone buzzed again, this time with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Stop digging," said a distorted voice on the other end. "Walk away, Claire, before you end up like Halloway." Her blood turned cold. "Who is this?" she demanded, but the line went dead. Claire stared at her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. The warning was clear, but she wasn't the type to back down. Whoever was behind this was watching her closely, and the stakes had just escalated. Someone didn't want her finding the truth. But Claire knew she was closer than ever to unraveling the conspiracy behind Evan Halloway's disappearance. And no threat was going to stop her. Who is behind the cryptic message? What will Claire do next? Don't miss out. Subscribe and share to keep following this thrilling mystery. Chapter 4. The Trap. Claire's heart raced as she paced her apartment, replaying the phone call in her mind. Every instinct told her to proceed cautiously, but she couldn't ignore the growing sense that time was running out. Whoever was pulling the strings in this case wasn't just trying to scare her. They were capable of far worse. And now they had made it personal. Determined not to be intimidated, she decided to visit Evan Halloway's family. Maybe his wife, Lauren, had some answers. The two had been inseparable, at least from what she'd learned during the trial. But when she arrived at their home, it was clear something was wrong. The front door was slightly ajar. "Lauren," Claire called out cautiously as she stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She reached for her phone, ready to call Detective Lucas, when she heard a soft sobbing coming from the living room. Claire rushed in, finding Lauren Halloway sitting on the couch, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in her hands. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying for hours. "He's gone, isn't he?" Lauren whispered without looking up. "They took him. I know they did." Claire knelt beside her. "What happened? Did Evan say anything before he disappeared?" Lauren nodded shakily. The night before the verdict, he was restless. He kept saying he was afraid, that something was wrong with the case, but he wouldn't tell me what. He just said he had to do the right thing. She broke down again, her hands trembling. Claire's pulse quickened. Did he leave you any messages? Anything that might help us find him? Lauren hesitated, then handed Claire the crumpled note. It was short, only 2 lines scribbled in a hurry. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Beneath it was the same sequence of numbers and symbols as the note found in Evan's car. Claire's stomach churned. The message was clear. Evan had known he was in danger. But what was he involved in that led to this? Before she could ask Lauren more, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Claire spun around just in time to see a man, tall and masked, standing in the doorway. He moved swiftly, grabbing Lauren by the arm. "Stay back!" The man growled, his voice sharp. Claire's heart pounded in her chest as she reached for her phone. But before she could dial, the man dragged Lauren toward the door, disappearing into the night. By the time Claire ran outside, they were gone. Breathless and panicked, she knew this was no longer just about finding Evan. Now, the people responsible had taken his wife, and Claire knew she had walked straight into their trap. The danger escalates. What will happen next? Make sure to subscribe and share for the next gripping chapters of The Silent Verdict. Chapter 5. The Network. Hours felt like days as Claire sat in her office, poring over every document, photo, and scrap of evidence tied to the case. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who were these people? Why had they targeted Evan Halloway and now his wife? And why had they let Kent walk free without so much as a second glance? The more she thought about it, the clearer it became that Raymond Kent was not the puppet master. He was just a cog in a much larger machine. She needed more answers, and she needed them fast. Lauren Halloway's abduction had upped the stakes. Now, 2 innocent lives were in the balance, and time was running out. As the evening settled over the city, Claire's phone buzzed with a message from Detective Lucas. "Meet me at the docks. Urgent." The docks? Claire frowned. That wasn't Lucas's usual meeting spot, and he'd never been cryptic with her before. But then again, nothing about this case had followed normal rules. She grabbed her coat, a sharp pang of apprehension gripping her. She tucked the cipher note into her bag and headed out. The docks were quiet, deserted except for the occasional sound of water lapping against the boats. The air smelled of salt and oil, thick with the lingering moisture from the river. As she approached the meeting point, Claire felt her nerves tighten. Something about the setting felt off, too isolated, too perfect for something to go wrong. "Lucas?" she called out, scanning the shadows. "Over here." His voice came from behind a stack of crates. She followed the sound cautiously, her eyes darting around, ready for anything. When she rounded the corner, she saw him standing there, holding a folder, but something in his posture made her pause. He wasn't acting like himself. His usual sharp, confident demeanor was replaced with a strange stiffness, like he was nervous. Claire's instincts kicked in, telling her to tread carefully. "What's going on?" she asked, keeping her distance. Lucas avoided her eyes, shuffling through the folder. "I found something you need to see," he said, his voice low, strained. "But first, you need to know this goes much deeper than we thought." "What do you mean?" Claire pressed, her heart pounding in her chest. He finally looked up, and the expression on his face sent a chill down her spine. "This isn't just about Kent," he said, almost whispering. "There's a network, an entire system covering up cases like this. Halloway was part of something bigger, something dangerous. They get to people, Claire. They make them disappear." "Who are they?" Claire demanded, stepping closer. "What is this network?" Lucas glanced over his shoulder, then back at her, lowering his voice. "I don't know all the players, but I found out something. They're using these ciphers, codes like the one you found, to communicate. The problem is, every time we get close to figuring one out, someone disappears." Claire's blood ran cold. "So Halloway was involved in this?" Lucas nodded. "Not willingly. He found out about it by accident. Someone inside the court system approached him, and he became a liability. That's why they took him, and now his wife. They're tying up loose ends. Claire's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even realized were there. This wasn't just about a juror gone missing. It was about control, about keeping certain truths hidden. "And the police?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas shook his head slowly. "Some of them are in on it. I don't know who to trust anymore. I had to meet you here, away from the station." Before Claire could process the magnitude of what Lucas was saying, the sound of a car engine roared to life behind them. Her heart jumped into her throat. A black SUV pulled up fast, its headlights cutting through the darkness. "Run!" Lucas shouted, but it was too late. The SUV's doors flew open, and men in dark suits poured out, guns drawn. Claire spun around, looking for cover, but there was nowhere to go. Lucas grabbed her arm, pulling her behind the crates. "You have to get out of here," he hissed, pulling something from his jacket pocket. "A flash drive. Take this. It's everything I've got on the network. You need to expose them." "But what about you?" Claire asked, her pulse racing. Lucas's expression hardened. "I'll buy you time. Now go." Without thinking, Claire took the flash drive and ran, darting between the crates as bullets whizzed past her. She could hear the sound of shouting, the echo of boots on the concrete, but she kept running, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The dock stretched out in front of her like a labyrinth, each turn taking her deeper into the shadows. She didn't stop until she was sure she was far enough away, hidden behind a stack of barrels near the water's edge. Her hands shook as she clutched the flash drive. Inside it were the answers she needed, answers that could blow the entire conspiracy wide open. But at what cost? Claire's life is on the line. Will she uncover the truth behind the mysterious network before it's too late? Subscribe and share to follow this thrilling journey. Chapter 6. The Web Unravels. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment, the flash drive plugged into her laptop, staring at the files that flickered across the screen. Hundreds of documents, coded emails, transactions, an entire web of corruption and manipulation. This was bigger than she had ever imagined. The network Lucas had mentioned wasn't just local, it was international. It stretched across borders, involving corporations, government officials, even law enforcement agencies. The people who controlled it had their hands in everything from legal cases to political decisions, manipulating outcomes to suit their agenda. Evan Halloway had stumbled into this by sheer bad luck. As a juror, he had overheard something he shouldn't have. And once they realized he knew too much, they had made him disappear. But the documents didn't just stop at Evan. They went back years, showing a pattern of influence in high-profile cases all over the world. The same ciphers, the same tactics. Witnesses silenced, evidence buried, the powerful protected while the innocent suffered. Claire's hands trembled as she scrolled through the files. How many lives had been ruined by this network? How many more would be if she didn't act? She paused on one particular file, a set of coded messages sent between two men. One of them was Raymond Kent. The other was a name she hadn't seen before, Anton Devereaux. A wealthy financier with ties to powerful politicians, Devereaux's influence reached into every corner of the business world. If Kent was a cog in the machine, Devereaux was the engine. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was an unknown number again. "You're in over your head, Claire," the distorted voice warned. "Turn over the flash drive, and maybe you'll walk away from this." Claire swallowed hard, her mouth dry. "Who are you?" she demanded, but the line went dead, just like before. She stared at the phone in her hand, heart racing. They were watching her closer than ever, but she wasn't going to back down now. She had come too far. She quickly backed up the files onto multiple storage devices, sending copies to her trusted contacts, knowing that if something happened to her, the truth would still come out. Then she grabbed her coat and headed out. There was one last person she needed to confront, Anton Devereaux. If she could get to him, maybe she could bring down the entire network. As she sped through the city streets, the weight of what she was about to do settled over her. This was the moment everything could come crashing down, her career, her life. But she didn't care. If she didn't expose this conspiracy, no one else would. When she arrived at Devereaux's estate, the gate was open. Too easy, she thought. Claire walked up the long driveway, her pulse hammering in her ears. She didn't have a plan, just the truth and enough evidence to destroy Devereaux's empire. But as she reached the door, she knew she wasn't the only one hunting. The end. If you enjoyed our story, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.